You are high.
Is that what it is?
That is not me, like, 49.
Okay. I was gonna say, that's what I have a subscription to Audible, so, I get audiobooks. I got that back in the day when I was traveling quite a bit to various campuses to teach and stuff like that, and I'd be just driving along, and I just got tired of listening to music. So, I'm like, give me some podcasts, give me some sermons or something like that, so that's what I ended up doing. Are you trying to show the Cheez-It on the video? Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm excited. I love church history. This is our second year in a row doing this. We started last year, and we went through the first volume of Nehem's series, the first 5 or 6 centuries of the church, and that was a good time. I thought. I don't know. I had fun. And it does give you a chance to either learn or relearn some of the things that you've heard about in church history, and see how these things kind of connect together. What is our relationship to, for example, Augustine, or the church fathers, or what is our relationship to the medieval church? And that's what we're going to be getting at over the next 10 or 11 weeks here. We trace our roots back to through church history to the faith, to the Bible. Now I know there's a Baptist group that does that. What's it called? Landmark Trail of Blood or whatever. We're not that. But nonetheless, what we do see is we see doctrinal faithfulness in various places throughout the church history. Another thing that I'm really excited about, this is sort of a spin-off of what we did last summer. This last. When was the council? That was last year. There it is.
It was last
That was-
year.
That was about a year ago, wasn't it?
Last year, June.
Okay.
27th to the 30th.
And but we were out. There was a Catholic conference in town that was a worldwide conference, a gathering. It was called
The biggest one they ever had.
the Eucharistic Congress. Basically, they got the Roman Catholics from all over the world, the scholars, the apologists. And David and I had the opportunity and the blessing to go downtown and just start engaging some of these people. And we just stood out on the corner with our half-mile hailer and started preaching. And of course, we got some yahoos, we always get that. We had actual theologians come up to us and start talking with us. And it was at first you're kind of intimidated until you start realizing, by the grace of God, the Holy Spirit, and a little bit of knowledge of church history and doctrine, this is not difficult because we have the truth. So that was a good time, and it was not adversarial at all. There were a couple of guys who changed it, but it was very
Higher than average percentage of the street ministry.
Oh, yeah.
That were very willing to engage in conversation and do what they were talking about.
yeah, and at the end of the day, they didn't get angry and frustrated.
They were surprised that we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, I guess evidently they were getting frustrated with Protestants, because a lot of times the Protestants are not knowledgeable of church history and doctrine. So what's that?
No, I'm just thinking, the Middle Ages, it's not the 1990s, it's like. No, it's not. What type of, oh, really?
The 1990s.
I didn't think on me for something that happened like 6 years ago.
That's a brilliant saying. That's all. That's fine. It's 1990s. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So this is our number 2. We did number 1 last time. Number 2, we were going to be going through the medieval period, and in some ways, this is one of my favorite parts to go through. What we see is the development, especially as you engage Roman Catholics. This is why I brought it up, is because Roman Catholics will talk about what the Church Fathers said. Roman Catholics will talk about their doctrines as if they have a grounding in Scripture. Well, if you study church history, what you find real quick is that you see the development of these doctrines over years, and some of them don't even get codified by the church until 1,000 years after the apostolic period. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I was right, you're wrong. So it's not really right, it's God. You can see where the beginning of that. So we'll listen to some of that. All right, so what do we So, first thing, yes, okay. Let me say, here's the book, let's start with the book for a second. We're going to be studying through 2,000 different Christ followers, volume 2, the Middle Ages. And this is what the physical copy of it looks like. It's part of Nick Edom's 5, hopefully soon to be 6 volumes that Bible transition. So it's very readable, very accessible, you look not, you get skimmed by the details. You get some good reading. Yeah, exactly. So, Turkey, you rush back to me here. Yeah, no, you wouldn't. No, anyway, that's what we do. What's that?
Chapter one.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, there's nothing due today. So, yeah, I was, so you know how famous I am for typos, right?
It's a wonderful one.
So here is, so starting week 2, just, now I have a suggested reading thing here. Now, what I did mention earlier, and I'm still holding to this, is that we're not gonna go through the book as the book goes, in the chapter by chapter. And the reason for that is because the way that the book is organized is it's more topical. It'll go from a topic and run up, finish that topic out, then it kind of rewinds and then goes forward. So all these things are happening concurrently, and you wouldn't know that, if you're just reading the book, like the Crusades are happening at the same time as this is happening, and so forth. You don't necessarily catch that. But what I'm trying to do is make a timeline, and we're going to work through the timeline. But do go ahead and this is a suggestion on how to read it, and you'll get the more detailed. See, we're not going to be able to get all the details that Needham does in his book here. So what I'll be talking about is just basically a timeline, and then we'll hit some highlights. Obviously, I'm not a historian like he is, so I'm not going to get every detail. But there are some very important things. Now, to give you a little bit, so for those who know me, for those who don't, to give you a little bit of background for me, I teach philosophy and ethics at Ivy Tech College. I've taught at Grace College and Indiana Tech College, those things as well. And at Grace, I taught a number of other things as well. Now, the reason I bring that up is because I'm kind of a theology philosophy nerd, and I will dig a little bit more deeply into those arenas when we come to, for example, the filioque controversy or the iconoclast controversy or, those kinds of things. I kind of dig a little bit deeper on those because I find them fascinating. Or the Eucharistic controversy or, the Avignon schism, those kinds of things. Because I like to see the development of ideas now. But I'm hoping that we'll pull in some historical things as well because there's some really cool history. Especially if we're going to be talking about Islam and the incursion of Islam into the Mediterranean world at this time. We're going to see the Crusades happening and all that entails. And then it's largely in part of the Crusades and the immigration displacement that takes place during the Crusades is actually a major driver for the Protestant Reformation, and we'll see how that happens. So were the Crusades bad? That was something that went on here a couple of years ago. Yes. Were they good? Well, God used them for his purpose, and so in his providence, God used the Crusades to bring about a zealous rediscovery of the gospel as the Protestant Reformation got underway because of those kinds of things. But we'll see all that as time goes on. It is a fascinating time in history indeed. So, yeah, that's my suggested reading pace. I mean, go as fast or as slow as you like. I'm not going to have a reading quiz, but we're not taking this class for credit, right? So I'm not going to have a bunch of reading quizzes and a final exam unless you want me to give you one, or a paper or anything like that. But I would suggest that reading is an excellent way to learn. So yeah, make sure to do some of that or listening if that suits you better. All right, any questions so far? Nope. Pretty sure. Just kidding.
It's early.
All right. So we'll move on from the schedule then. That's my suggested schedule. We'll move on from that then, and we'll dig into an overview. Oh, see, I messed it up again. Well, the Middle Ages can be divided up into three distinct parts. There's the early Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, and the Late Middle Ages. In each now there's obviously they're not watertight distinctions here. There's a bit of overlap, but there are things that generalize. There are events and attitudes, theologies that sort of characterize each one of these distinct divisions of the Middle Ages. The early Middle Ages represents sort of an intellectual and cultural retreat, if you will, from the apostolic era and then the patristic era. What we see is because of warfare, because of the false religion of Islam ascending, and the sort of constant battling and bickering and this sort of thing, we see a period of cultural decline during this time in the Mediterranean world, particularly as it relates to the Holy Land and that sort of thing. The High Middle Ages are when the Christians start fighting back, and we see the Crusades, for better or for worse, they start up during that particular period, and that's what really characterizes that. We also see during that period, during the High Middle Ages, the development of the scholastics and various things like that. We'll get into more of that in just a minute. And then we have the Late Middle Ages, and the Late Middle Ages is we see the scholastics are kind of coming to a close, and we see the way being paved for the Protestant Reformation with people like John Wycliffe and the Hussites, which is a fascinating. Bohemia is, you hear Bohemia. What does that bring to mind? Somebody's going to start singing Queen in a second. Go ahead.
I think the 60s or 70s.
60s or 70s because you're Bohemian, right? And it's sort of like the old school hipsters, right?
I saw a picture about that recently. Sort of thing.
Bohemian. Yeah, you think of hippies or something like that, Bohemia was ground zero for the dawn of the Protestant Reformation, like the early morn of the Protestant Reformation, when John Huss gets a hold of John Wycliffe's writings, And then John Huss gets burned at the stake as a heretic because he's saying, well, we should probably pay attention to the Bible rather than the Pope. He gets burned at the stake. And all of a sudden, people like John Ziska, who is the man, John Ziska he is an undefeated general of the Bohemian army. And he brings the Catholic Church to its knees, essentially, and forces them to deal with him as a monarch, so to speak. He's not a monarch, but he's a secular power, and yet he is fighting under the Hussite banner, the sort of revolution. But John Huss, when he gets burned at the stake, I'm going to mess this up. This is such a glorious thing. He says that, what did he say? Something to the effect of,
You may burn this goose.
that's it, yeah. Go ahead.
I don't know the exact quote. but
Yeah, it's something to the effect that you may burn this goose, but it will.
Something else, but in 100 years, a
The swan
swan
will arise.
and
Yeah. And in 100 years, Martin Luther comes on the scene. 1517. And that brings about the end of the
I forget how the swan is
Reformation.
connected to it exactly, but we'll
yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, there's a connection between Swan and Martin Luther. But yeah, it's rather interesting. But then next year, maybe, Lord willing, if we're still alive and kicking, maybe we'll do a Reformation, because medieval period's cool, but the Reformation, it's way cooler. so we will get into that next year. But anyway, so that's those are some of the things we'll be looking at. The early, the high, the late Middle Ages. That's where we'll be going. The early Middle Ages. Let me give you an example of some of the things we'll be highlighting. Now, obviously, there'll be some things that kind of go in and around this. You can copy these dates down if you'd like to, or these events. We will be going back through them, so you don't necessarily have to, but if you want to, you can. And really, that's all I want to do tonight, is go over an overview, and then we will get into more detail the next time we meet. But the early Middle Ages, again, this is 590 AD to about 1000 AD, so 6th through 11th centuries. We see that this is often referred to as the Dark Ages. Perhaps you've heard of that phrase before, the Dark Ages. And oftentimes people will take that to mean the entire Middle Ages are the Dark Ages. Well, there was and certainly the atheists who have come after and refer to the Age of Reason, quote unquote, as the Enlightenment.
Yes.
They refer to that as the Enlightenment. They believe that we came out of the Middle Ages, which they consider the entire Middle Ages as the Dark Ages. Of course, that's their historical knowledge showing through. But they would say that then with the Renaissance, which means rebirth, we come into an era of enlightenment after that, the Age of Reason. And they don't even acknowledge the Protestant Reformation. I remember I was taking a history of Western Civ class in college. It was not a Christian college. Anyway, I was taking this class, and I'm reading, and it goes from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. And I'm like, wait a second. There's another period of time in here, the Protestant Reformation, that's hugely important to understanding Western civilization. How do you get the development of representative democracy or representative government without the Protestant Reformation? You don't, actually. But anyway, I started flipping back to the pages, and there was like a paragraph that was about a third of the page long devoted to the Protestant Reformation, and a chapter to the Enlightenment, and a chapter to the Renaissance, and it's like, God, you guys. But anyway, they believe, yeah, well, that's revisionist history, right? So they would call the whole thing the Dark Ages, but technically speaking, the first period of the early Middle Ages is technically what is referred to as the Dark Ages, and the reason for that is because we do see a decline in philosophy and history, or philosophy and in theology. We see a decline in culture, in architecture, and things like that at the very beginning of the Middle Ages. Yeah.
We also see it in the Dark Ages, a lot of war.
Sure, yeah. Well, there's been a lot of conflict, right? We know the fall of Rome, the Byzantine Empire starting up. Yeah. What's that?
My last lesson, I read on this before.
Yeah.
The first part. My last date was 4/18, 80.
418. Okay.
In my notes.
Okay.
We left off talking about it.
Between there.
Yeah, there is. If you remember, we didn't quite finish the whole book last time. So yeah, that was. Yeah, we didn't quite finish the whole book, so that's why I'm starting at 590. Yeah, but I'm glad you kept that. That's fantastic. I would encourage you to read the last couple chapters of that book. Because I think we talked about Augustine and those. We ended on him, I think. So yeah. Anyway, so this is often referred to as the Dark Ages, and that, by the way, is why I'm doing this one a little differently because I got too much into the details last time. So we see the rising of the Merovingian dynasty. This is a dynasty of kings and rulers that ruled from about the 5th to the 8th century. There are some strong ones toward the end. There certainly are some weak ones, and they'll get supplanted by the Carolingians, which we'll talk about here shortly. The Merovingians. I remember. I don't know. I think it was the Matrix, the movie The Matrix. If anybody's seen that, there's a guy called the Merovingian in there, and I was like, that sounds. When I remember watching the movie, I was like, that sounds familiar. Where have I heard that before? Of course, I hadn't gone to college then. At that point, I just read, but yeah. Anyway, the Merovingian dynasty. We'll see them a little bit about them as we go along. The filioque controversy. Filioque is a Latin word or Latin phrase that means "and the Son," and the S-O-N, son. So we'll talk more about the filioque controversy, but that controversy actually gets started in about the 6th century, but it really gets codified in the West around the 11th century, and that's when you see the Great Schism, the splitting of Eastern and Western churches, and this controversy has a lot to do with it. And the Son, basically the idea here is that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, and both agree on that, and filioque means and the Son. And the Western Church adopts the filioque controversy, putting it into the Nicene Creed, and the Eastern Orthodox Church denies that. They believe, and there are underlying theological reasons for that, which we'll get more into detail about, but yeah.
Even some modern Eastern Orthodox believers will anathematize you if you hold to the filioque clause.
Well, I do, so.
They're anathematized by a lot of people.
Somebody thinks I'm a heretic.
Oh, yeah.
Evidently, the Mormon Church doesn't think I'm a heretic because I'm baptized by proxy into the Mormon Church.
Explain that later.
The Mormon Church will baptize you by proxy, so they get some little
Well,
guy.
I know that, and
in
some
the
they
tank.
baptize baptism for the dead and baptism for proxy for something else, sure.
They get a guy in the tank.
So
They
they
put
just-
your name up there, and then they dunk him, and then
So
put
they
somebody
never
else's
use
name
it.
up there, and they dunk him again. So this guy's just getting dunked all day long. So evidently,
Shrivel up.
well, I've got close family who are pretty high up in the Mormon Church. So,
I didn't know this about you.
well, I don't know them, so
Oh.
the one that I knew died. So,
So David's not only Catholics, it's more.
yeah.
Yeah, he looks all kinds of messed up. That's all right.
Evidently, so Alice was the name. She's my father's cousin.
Second cousin.
Yeah. So I knew her and her son because we lived in Franklin. I think they might have lived close by, and we played with Trampus all the time. He was the son. And
Are
yeah.
there some that are breaking away from the Mormon Church? I just had a post.
No, there always are. Yeah, there's like the
Yeah,
fundamentalist
is there
LDS.
Is there a split?
Maybe we need an LDS class.
Yeah, LDS would be fun. Oh, they're real fun. And maybe if I can get some
We'll have
connections,
tag
I can
team
get some of that magical underwear.
Oh my.
Well, she broke.
So that does exist.
It's a thing. It's a real thing.
I heard that.
Most of the school rushes,
I'm not gonna model it, but I'll just put it on like something you can hang it up.
Is that your son?
Well, he didn't really.
The secrecy of the Mormon temple ceremonies is interesting.
Yeah, I had to tell him, he forgot.
Well, I didn't know that I didn't realize they were Mormon because we haven't talked to them in years.
Well, I'm sure he's not living anymore. He used to be the high priest at the.
Oh, yeah.
temple.
That guy's not around. Yeah.
Wow, you were kidding. Wow.
Anyway, so
She's Latter-day Saints, but not Mormon Church.
well, now that is a rebranding effort.
Yeah, that's semantics.
They're just trying to rebrand it. The whole LDS is trying to rebrand. They're trying to get away from the name Mormon.
Well, I only know of one person.
Oh, no, that's an actual effort that's going on.
Right,
right
it makes
now.
them sound more Christian because that way they're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah,
That's
so
the idea.
that's what they're trying to infiltrate the Christians. And they love Baptists because Baptists don't know their Bible. So,
Was there a prophet by that name?
no.
It comes from Moroni, the angel that talked to Dr.
Yeah,
Smith.
yes, somewhere in there, yeah. All right, well, let's go from the filioque controversy to Mormonism. All right, that's how this is gonna go. Okay.
It all makes sense.
All right, Pope Gregory. Gregory, otherwise known as Saint Gregory the Great. Pope Gregory is the first pope in the modern sense. Now they'll say that Peter is the first pope, but I beg to differ. Pope Gregory is the one who vastly improves, quote unquote, the power of the pope, and the standing of the pope, and he is the one that really brings in, it spearheads that. He's a very, very able and powerful pope, greatly expanding the power of the pope. No, I thought Tevin was going to be next. Okay, never mind. I have it out of order in my head now. Well, because Pope Gregory ends up actually crowning some monarchs.
Yes.
So anyway, let's see. The rule of Saint Benedict. This happens in 600 AD. 600 AD is kind of an interesting year. You get the rule of Saint Benedict, and you see in Benedict the founding of the Benedictine order. Now, this rule of Benedict is basically a guide by which they are to live their lives, and his becomes the one that after which a number of other orders, monastic orders, start modeling their stuff. Now, what this means or what this is that we see a number of people who are Christians getting sort of fed up with the corruption that has infiltrated the church, and they get themselves out, and this is sort of a carryover. Remember, last time we talked about Saint Anthony beginning sort of the desert monastic orders and this sort of thing. Well, Benedict is not so ascetic as that, but he is very. He does give an order that is focused on spiritual development, and he requires the monks under his sway to live accordingly. It becomes a set of orders by which other groups start patterning their various orders as well, their rules. But we see the growth of the monastic movement at this time because things are so corrupt. People are just wanting to sort of cloister away. And of course, what happens when you do that? What happens when Christians?
They fall away.
Well, what happens when Christians pull a John Galt? You know what I'm talking about when I say John Galt? Nobody. Okay, sorry. It's a novel by Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And the idea behind the novel is all the intelligent people, all of the producers, like they quit and they all move to a place together and let the rest of society just sort of decline. Well, that's exactly what we see happening. The people who could have, would have, should have been godly influences in the culture, they gather together in their little cloisters and they do their little rules and they live their little lives and everything's all well and good, but then the outside world just starts declining. And this is I think one of the things that helps lead to the decline of culture at this time, because they do pull out of not all of them, but they do tend to pull out of what's going on in the world, even the world of the unbelievers. They retreat from that. They go back to their orders. But we'll see if that's a fair assessment as we get along. But that happens. That starts this monastic movement starts really growing around 600 AD. That same year, we see Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Muhammad is purported to go and have had his vision by which he pins the Quran. I don't know if he had a vision or not, but I do know that if he did have a vision, it was not the Archangel Gabriel, as he reports. It was not Gabriel bringing him this. It was a lying spirit. It was a demon. If he actually had the vision, now he could have been a total fraud. like Joseph Smith. But who knows? I don't know. He may have had a vision. He may have seen something. He may have, demons masquerade as angels of light all the time. And Islam, as we will see, and as we are seeing even now, is a demonic religion. So Muhammad founds Islam, and Islam very quickly is a militaristic religion. It sets about being very aggressive, and it has no qualms whatsoever about conversion by the sword. Has no qualms whatsoever about that. And so, in just a few short decades later, Islam has conquered Jerusalem, of all places. They conquered Jerusalem in 638 AD. Oh, well then. Let's put the rest of them up there. So that happens, and we'll see more about Islam. And it's rather interesting because what we see during this period is it gets conquered. Jerusalem gets conquered by the Muslims, but at first, the Muslims, once they get sort of established, and it's sort of the thing that's generally accepted. Okay, if we go out there, we're going to see the Muslims. They tend to adopt a somewhat tolerant disposition toward Christians and Jews. I mean, because they have pilgrims, Christian pilgrims coming to Jerusalem all the time, and Jewish pilgrims coming to Jerusalem. You would think that if they have any sort of economic sense about them, they would just, charge tolls and charge rent, and you can make a big thing, especially since Jerusalem is not really an A-lister in terms of Muslim holy sites. Now, it is more so, it is today, because the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is there. But back then, they were fine with having Christians and Jews pay their tax and come on in. That is up until the Turks start coming through. They start killing everybody. But we'll talk about them later because that's later in history. So, but anyway, Jerusalem initially is conquered by the Muslims then. Boniface, you've heard of Boniface, not Boniface, Boniface. Saint Boniface, he is the one who he's doing missionary work, and this is one of the ways this highlights the distinction between the way that initially Christians are growing the church and Muslims are growing their movement. Right? Because we've got Boniface going and being a missionary. He's being a missionary, and he does some pretty fun things. We'll talk about that when we get to Boniface. But he is a remarkable man. Then we have the iconoclastic controversy between the 8th and 9th centuries. In the iconoclastic controversy, again, this is one of those things that is driving a wedge between the Eastern Church and the Western Church. Iconoclastic means to destroy the icons, okay? Smashing the idols, smashing the icons. Now, are you familiar with what an icon is?
It's an image
Yeah, it's an image, it's a picture.
to which veneration is paid very often.
Yeah, well, and that's it. So when it begins, the iconoclastic controversy is between, in the East, they have these little pictures of saints and Jesus and biblical people in the Bible, characters from the scriptures. And each one of them has a picture and depicts a saint or Jesus or whatever, and they are used to tell stories about that are found in the Bible. So there's that. There are the iconodules who want to promote the icons, and the iconoclasts who want to destroy the icons. Now the interesting thing is that there's this big thing between East and West. It starts out, the Eastern Church uses icons, and they justify by saying, well, there are people here who are illiterate, they need to see pictures in order to, understand the story of the Bible. What's that?
Teach them to read.
Well, there's that. That was the Protestant Reformation, actually. In that same history class with the utter lack of Protestant Reformation, we had to do a research paper. And I did mine I did research, and there's actually data about this, about the literacy rates of Protestant countries versus Catholic countries. And the Protestant countries are through the roof, and the Catholics are all illiterate. And
Because they had Bibles in their language that they wanted to read.
I did that. That's exactly it. I did that presentation in class, and I might have offended more than a couple Catholics. But it was a good time.
Thanks be to God for Johann Gutenberg.
Oh yeah, for sure. So anyway, but what ends up happening? So they're saying, look, we're not venerating, we're not praying to these people, these saints, and this sort of thing. What ends up happening over the entirety of the controversy lasts for a couple centuries. What ends up happening is they go from pictures, no pictures, and just pictures to learn to no pictures, and then we go from that to pictures to pray through. So you look at the picture and you're praying through to that saint, to three-dimensional on the west, three-dimensional statues that they are venerating. So that's sort of how it ends up until we get to the Protestant Reformation. That's what we got. We got both sides, and the East is complaining that, look, you guys are worshiping three-dimensional statues. And the West is complaining, well, you guys are, worshiping these pictures. They're two-dimensional, Yeah, we'll see. It's a very interesting time. It's like, how did you both miss it so bad?
The Second Amendment says.
Like, I don't know, whatever. But the Protestant reformers will take care of that one. All right, so then we get in the 8th and 9th centuries also, we get the Carolingian dynasty. This is when the Merovingians are getting weaker. And a guy by the name of Charles Martel comes in. Martel is a I guess old French word for hammer. So Charles the Hammer, he's basically a governor. He comes in and starts cleaning house. And he is serving a weak king at the time. So these guys, the Carolingians, all have great names. So you've got Charles the Hammer. Sounds pretty good, right? The next guy is Pepin, and he's called Pepin the Short. Okay? He's called Pepin the Short. But Pepin the Short actually gets the title of king. He's the one that actually starts off the Carolingian dynasty. Now his forebear, sets it up for him, and he just sort of spikes it. Pepin the Short, okay, that's his name, the Short. His son is Charlemagne. Okay, Charlemagne is 7 foot tall, so he must have got it from his mom. I don't know. What's that? Yeah,
Is it Charlemagne?
Charlemagne.
Charles the Great.
Charles, yeah. He goes by Charlemagne, Charles the Great. Yeah. So he's 7 foot tall. He is one of the most dynamic figures since Constantine, right? He is a huge figure. And then I'm going to miss this, but anyway, the final king in the Carolingian dynasty is Charles the Bald. So I forget, there's one guy in between, I can't remember off the top of my head what his name is, but then there's Charles the Bald. So from Charles the Hammer to Charles the Bald. So
Pepin the Short in there.
Pepin the Short, yeah, and then Charlemagne. It's
They have fun.
good guys. Anyway, well, so you got the Carolingian dynasty. Then we see the conquest and conversion of the Norsemen. Now, when I say the conquest and conversion of the Norsemen, understand what I mean by that. The Norsemen come in and start moving up on the Britons, okay, all of the Anglo-Saxons that are there, and they start invading and taking over territories. And they are pagans. They are flat out idol worshiping, human sacrificing pagans. And these are the Vikings. They're coming in. They're just terrorizing. They terrorize Europe or England, but they also terrorize France as well. They start making their way into France. And if you watch the Vikings show, which I don't exactly know, but Vikings, there's a guy named Harold the
Terror.
Blue. I forget his name. He's after whom Bluetooth is named. I think it's Harold the Bluetooth. But he's you get Bluetooth on these. Like this has got a little Bluetooth symbol on it. I think. Fun. That's who it's named after. Harold. It's a great name for a king, Harold.
I wouldn't want to see the man smile.
But he was converted to Christianity. and he converted his whole people to Christianity. Now you don't get this on the Viking show because they don't show any of that sort of thing. But he was. Well, the Viking show is ahistorical also. It rams together about 2,000 years, well, a couple centuries anyway, worth of Viking history into one generation. So you got people, so these guys did not even live at the same time. But anyway, so he's also one of the first kings of a united Scandinavian tribes. He's sort of a mini emperor, right? He becomes Christian and he Christianizes them. Now, does that mean they're all saved? Of course not. I don't even know if he was actually saved, but he professes faith. And this is also, incidentally, where, well, it's actually a little bit before this, where the poem Beowulf comes from. Has anybody ever read Beowulf? I have a bilingual edition of that. It's pretty cool. It's half in English, half in Old English, what it was originally written in. And yeah, you can't read Old English. It's not even the same language. But it's fascinating. But it is a very Christian novel. And what's interesting is, so you read that, right? And King Arthur's taking place around, probably around the time of Alfred the Great, which we'll get to him in a little bit, maybe a little bit before. And who has read the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy? This is my plug for the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy. It's a great trilogy. So good. So good, especially number 3. But anyway, in there, he brings Merlin back to life from King Arthur's court. And Merlin, he goes through this description of what Merlin is like. And Merlin is a Christian in both the Excalibur, mythology or whatever, legends, and also in C.S. Lewis, he has Merlin as a Christian. But Merlin as a Christian doesn't fit in very well with present society, because he has no problem. Like in the book there, he's talking about this woman, and he looks over at the modern day prophet sort of guy. You just have to read it. And Merlin does, and he says she was supposed to have a child that was going to have a tremendous impact for basically for the cause of Christ in the world. But she and her husband chose intentional barrenness. You should have her head cut off. and it's like, whoa. And that's like he's like, that's totally consistent with like Merlin's Christianity. But Lewis is kind of interesting on that point. But anyway, he puts it much better than I just did. But I encourage you to read the book. It's fun. Just the books, I guess. Anyway, I digress. This is the conquest, the Norseman conquest, and then they convert to Christianity en masse. That's why it's so funny. You see all these Viking guys nowadays. Even what's his name, the FBI guy, talked about Charlie Kirk. I'll see you in Valhalla. It's like, wait a minute, you're Hindu. He's Christian. Why are we bringing Vikings into this? You know what I'm talking about? Who's bringing Vikings into this? Like Viking is a fad now, right? Because maybe it's because of the show, maybe it's whatever.
Or maybe Cash Patel doesn't know what he believes.
Yeah, Cash Patel's a confused individual. But anyway, I love the meme that says, "Why don't you just do what your pagan ancestors did?
Convert to Christianity.
Convert to Christianity."
Right.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, because they did en masse. To the point where Beowulf, our oldest record, is a Christian work. Yeah, I got those out of order, I think. There we go. Okay, here we go. Here's Alfred. Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great is a king in what is now Britain, in England, in the UK. He is known as Alfred the Great. He is a kind of a sickly guy, but he has a warrior spirit, and he actually takes the Norsemen he takes them to lunch, basically. Well, that's sort of my colloquialism, right? So he combats them. He meets them head on, and he is the first king to start uniting a significant amount of people to actually do battle against the Vikings who are coming in, and actually present a problem to them. Because before they were just kind of sweeping through the countryside, raiding all the monasteries, and then all of a sudden Alfred says, "Nope, no more." He unites the tribe, so to speak, and not only does he go to war very effectively against the Vikings, he also begins to institute societal and cultural reformation. He's a Christian king, and he starts to advocate for education. And then he uses, because he's an intelligent and educated man, he starts using these things in order to combat the Vikings through strategy and various things like that. So whereas the Vikings just come on full on berserk, and they're just screaming and running, he starts strategizing, and through his strategy is able to pull off some very significant victories. But he never sees complete freedom. He's always under duress. He's always fighting, but he is very, very successful against them. Let's see. Then we've got the Eucharistic controversy, part 1. In the 9th century, and we have two individuals there, Rodbertus and Ratramnus. These two thinkers are going to be the two that square off about the Eucharistic. What do you suppose the Eucharistic controversy is about? What's that?
Had to do with the
Does
summer.
that have something to do with Catholic?
Oh yeah, very much. And we heard, I don't know how many times when we were at the National Eucharistic Congress or the International Eucharistic Congress. I don't know how many times we heard from some of these guys. Look, the doctrine of transubstantiation goes all the way back to the Church Fathers, 9th century. Okay, 9th century, and it's not even going to be over in the 9th century.
Doesn't get finalized until Aquinas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's about the same century in the 11th, 12th century. So we see this going on. One side saying that there is a literal presence of the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist, what we would call the Lord's table. And the other side says that no, it's a spiritual presence by faith. We feast on Christ spiritually by faith. It's not a physical reality. We take Christ in when we yes, the sacrament is there, and we're doing the motion with the bread and with the wine, but by faith we are receiving Christ in us, not by eating and drinking. Eating and drinking is just sort of this outward symbol, if you will, this outward performance that symbolizes what's happening spiritually. Yeah, they did. Rodbertus, that's it. I'm not having any more children, but maybe I can suggest it as a grandchild. Rodbertus.
Bert for short, perhaps.
That's a good
I
thing.
mean,
Wait,
you
grandchild.
gotta do something with that if you're gonna.
Grandpa, why do you hate me?
Why?
Well, it's either rat or rat,
Yeah, that's a rat for sure.
Ramdus.
That's
Now, Ramdus might be good if he's a football player. I don't know. But,
yeah.
Prior to the controversy, what were they believing? What were they practicing prior to that controversy?
There were a divergence of practices, and there were some who you can, in all fairness, you can trace people's thinking all the way back to the church fathers. You can pick out one or two of the guys who did talk about transubstantiation, or they hinted toward that. You don't find a definite outworking of that theology, though, and so they would literally just partake of the Lord's table with wine and bread, and that was it. They wouldn't do too much. Maybe they would say, "This is the body and this is the blood." That's what we say on a Sunday morning as well.
Sure.
But we can say that realizing it because we have taught and we have preached. This is not literally the body of Christ. This is not literally the blood of Christ. Yeah, it's a representation, but the symbol represents the thing that is symbolized. And so we can say that as long as we understand what we're talking about there, yeah, so yeah. Oops, did I go the wrong way? Did I really just get all of these? Oh, no, okay. The investiture controversy. The investiture. Now, this is where we see, yeah. We begin to see here some. Now we're going to see it before this. We begin to see a lot of commingling of church and state, and a lot of corruption growing in that way as well. The investiture controversy has to do with popes who have illegitimate children and cardinals who have illegitimate. By the way, we don't even have a totally celibate priesthood by this time. And there are.
Still don't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that hurts. Well, anyway, so the investiture controversy, they go, and basically this is where you see cardinals bequeathing title to their children. And there's problems with that. I hope you understand. I hope you see a problem. So let's say the cardinal is a Christian. Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument. There's nothing to ensure that that cardinal's son will be a Christian. And yet, if there is a passing on from father to son, then you have an easy road in for unregenerate church leaders, and that begins to happen. And during this controversy, there is a tremendous sort of reformation at the end of this. Of course,
Didn't they have to take a vow of celibacy at that time? Or was
Yes.
that later?
That's what ends up happening.
Oh, later.
After that, that's part of the resolution to this,
Okay.
is the celibate church clergy. Come on in. Now we have Eucharistic controversy part 2. A couple of really, a couple of more really well-named guys. So you have Berengar of Tours, not Berenger, or Derringer, Berengar of Tours and Lafranc of Canterbury, and they're taking up the usual posts. Canterbury. Well, that's a French versus English thing, right?
No, I mean, I typed myself.
What do you say?
Canterbury, England.
Yeah. Did I spell it wrong? No. All right. Then we have the filioque accepted by the papacy. Now, the filioque, if you remember, began all the way back in the 7th century, I think. And now finally it gets accepted by the papacy. This happens in 1014. And this adds to the deepening of the rift between East and West. So we are in the High Middle Ages. I forgot to even notice that. We're in the High Middle Ages today. But yeah. And then the Great Schism. The Great Schism of 1054, where you have the Pope excommunicating the Patriarch of Constantinople. And you have the Patriarch of Constantinople, which is where the Eastern Orthodox Church is centered in this day, who excommunicates the Pope. And you have this rift between East and West that to this day maintains, even after, we have to remind our Catholic friends this, even after the Second Vatican Council, which was back in the 60s, I think. The Second Vatican Council.
1960s.
That was where that was an ecumenical council. This was the most recent ecumenical council of the Church, the Catholic Church, where they described the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Protestant churches, various Protestant denominations, as their quote-unquote separated brethren. I was like, what exactly does that mean, guys? Because here's the catch, right? Because if that means that we are in the church, then we're saved. So stop bothering us. But if we're in the church, then that means the Council of Trent has been overruled because it was wrong, which means that you just contradicted an ecumenical council, which means that your ecumenical councils are suspect. Your magisterium is void of authority. Or it means that we are still separated in their view outside of the church and therefore outside of Christ. In which case, why are you making overtures toward us? Why not preach the gospel to us, whatever your gospel is? Anyway, so yeah, it's but the Great Schism is not yet not yet mended. So anyway, the Great Schism happens, and the Eastern Church and the Western Church formally divide. Now, do you remember? So the Eastern Church, as I said, was centered in Constantinople. What are they speaking in Constantinople? Greek. What was the New Testament originally written in? In Constantinople. It wasn't in Constantinople, but it was written in Greek. So in the Eastern Orthodox Church, it was written in Greek. The New Testament was originally written in Koine Greek. And the church, the Eastern Orthodox Church in Constantinople speaks Greek, reads Greek, uses Greek in their liturgy all the time, just directly out of the text of the New Testament. Right? So what about the Western Church, Roman Catholic Church? What do they speak? Centered in Rome, they speak Latin. Latin is not Greek.
No.
In order to get the Bible from Latin or from Greek into Latin, you have to have it translated. And we talked about that back last time. Who's the guy that did that? Do you guys remember that? Really cool guy. He's always pictured with a skull, holding on a skull or a lion in his paintings. His name is Jerome.
Yes, that's right. I kept thinking that the version of the word Vulgate kept coming.
Yes.
That's the translation, not the name of the Hebrew.
Was he Catholic?
Well, everybody was back then. They were small C Catholic.
Well, they have.
In Jerome's day, because the Roman Catholic Church, I would argue the Roman Catholic Church didn't actually come into existence until Pope Gregory. That would be my argument. Of course, Catholics are not going to agree with that. But the papacy was not codified until then. They trace it all the way back to Peter now, but I think they retroactively made him a pope because he wasn't a pope. But he was a bishop of Rome. But anyway.
He was also married, so
Yeah, he was married. That's very clearly stated. But anyway, but honestly, Pope Gregory was the first one to actually solidify the papacy as even a thing, as a center of power. Before that, there were bishops in every city, and they considered themselves equals. But Gregory starts getting things underway and starts building the infrastructure of the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church comes into being really, I would argue that, well, there's a progression. It starts with Gregory, with the papacy. 1054 is when the papacy splits itself off from the patriarchate, and then the Council of Trent, which is in the 16th century, is actually when the Roman Catholic Church adopts the doctrine that they use today. Yeah, go ahead.
Where did the cross come in?
Well, that goes way back to Constantine.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
And
Well,
it was to
obviously Jesus was
control
crucified on it.
the people. It was all to control the people.
Well, Constantine might have had a genuine conversion because he didn't need Christianity to control people. He would have been fine as a pagan. He had a religion to unite people under as a pagan. But he did have sort of this vision where he heard a voice that says, "Go and conquer in this sign." And it wasn't a cross that he had; it was a kiro, which is an early Christian symbol, right? It looks like a PX. The kiro, because the Greek letter is ki, which is the sound, and the rho, which is the R sound. So the kiro looks a bit like that's a sloppy one. It looks a little bit like that. But he go and conquer the sound, and that was an early Christian symbol. It's the first two letters in the word Christos, which is Christ. So that's who Constantine got that going, and then of course he later on would use the cross and fish. Fish had been used before that,
It was for the church.
So yeah, the fish was for the church because if you take ichthus, if you take the letters in Greek ichthus, and it's an anagram, and it stands for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. You take the first letter of each one of those words in Greek, you put them together, they spell ichthus, which means fish in Greek. And so that's why they would draw the fish sign, fish symbol. Yeah, Jesus Christus, huiou, theos, theou,
Theos, Soterius.
Yeah. So yeah, in a very anglicized enunciation of it, I guess, pronunciation.
Pretty cool though.
So anyway, it's the great schism.
So,
Yes,
so doesn't the word Christ represent light?
Christ literally means the anointed one.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also represents the light within, or it represents the
What-
breath of God.
I mean, if you read John chapter 1, Jesus is called the light that was coming into the world. You know,
Yes.
he had the light that was coming into the world. The darkness did not overcome it, and that sort of thing. But at that point, he was called the Word, right?
Yes.
So and then you get later on after verse 14, you get the Son, the Word was made flesh. So in the High Middle Ages, the Crusades. Oh, I didn't put a date on that. Well, that's because I'm going to go through 4 Crusades, first 4. Now there were other Crusades besides these or after these, and there was, I think, a 5th and a 6th, and then there was a Children's Crusade, which was just absolutely abhorrent. But these are the 4 main ones, and those are the dates on them. We see that stretches from like almost 1100 to for 200 years. Yeah.
Wasn't there also like a King's Crusade or something?
Yes, that rings a bell. I'd have to go back and look at all of the ones, but the main ones we'll be looking at are the first 4. But yeah, but the Children's Crusade, if you've heard about that, that's where somebody, I don't remember who it was, got it in their head after reading, a child shall lead them, to get a bunch of kids together and arm them and then send them to the Muslims. They didn't return.
It was largely French, wasn't it? Didn't they lose pretty much almost an entire generation because of it?
Well, a generation of boys, yeah, for sure, yeah.
I don't think they reached the Muslim side.
I think some of them, did reach some Muslims. that was the problem. Because the things that they did with little boys back then, by the way, that's the origin of Dracula.
Yes.
You've heard Vlad Dracul, the Impaler. He was obviously we hear Dracula, right? Vampires. Well, that's all silliness. But Vlad Dracul was a real person. We'll look at him later on. But he was a nobleman who had been given as a prize to a sheik as a child. And this sheik abused him for years until finally he broke away and did what he did to them. He hung them on spears along the road when he went to battle. That's the legend of Vlad Dracul. Well, the Dracula is the legend. The actual history is he did do that. He would go to war against these guys and he would put them on pikes and just line them up on the road, impaled on pikes. All the people that they killed in battle. He was very much a crusader against Islam. But we'll talk more about him later on. So there were mystics, the Catholic mystics. Some people who don't like and who don't believe that truth is to be found in the Word. They rely on mystical experience, visions and dreams and experiences and things like this. And anyway, so that starts. We see this the Roman Catholic mystics starting up about 12. Was it Bernard of Clairvaux? Is one of them. I can't remember all of them, but there are, I think Teresa is the name of one of them as well. They have these ecstatic experiences and they relate truth through that. It was interesting when we were at the Eucharistic Congress, St. John's Church was right down the road. And I don't know how many people we had tell us, you need to go down there and see all of the accounts of all of the experiences that people have and all this sort of thing. And I'm like, well, I have the Word weighed against the experience of these people. And I don't need the experience of people to tell me what is true. We have the Word of God.
And I also wanted us to go in and see the Eucharist they had set up with everybody genuflecting to it and bowing down
Oh,
to it
sure.
and all that. To go in and encounter Jesus was kind of the idea. So, no,
Right.
I hate the movie.
I I did that this morning when I was praying. So you know. All right, so then we have, moving on in the High Middle Ages, we have the coming of the scholastics. Let me throw these guys up here.
And so,
So the scholastics. Now, during this time, we see now the church. We hear this all the time. The church is not the one who invented the university, but they did do a very good job at advancing it. And the scholastics during the Middle Ages, we're looking at about the 11th century through the 14th century. We have these. These aren't even all of them, but these are some of the more prominent ones. These are called the schoolmen. Collectively, you know, they're called the schoolmen of the scholastics. These were men who blended theology, church doctrine, and philosophy, most notably Aristotelian philosophy. And most of them anyway. There are a couple of Platonics in there, but Platonicists, Platonists, whatever. Those are two different words. Yeah, Platonists. There we go. Thank you. There are a couple of different Platonists in there, but for the most part, they're taking Aristotelian philosophy and blending it with theology from the Bible. And so some of the more famous ones, Anselm of Canterbury. If you've ever heard of the ontological argument for the existence of God, that comes from Anselm. You want to hear it?
go for it.
You want to hear the ontological argument for the existence of God? Okay, premise number one. Watch this slide of here. Premise number one, God is a being greater than which none other can be imagined. Therefore, God exists. That's the argument. Is it persuasive? Even Bertrand Russell said it was sound. He hates Christians.
Yeah.
And so,
Unicorns are the greatest beings that we're imagining.
well, see, the thing about that is that you are not dealing with the ultimate being when you're talking about unicorns. You're talking about the particular. So here's what he means by that. God is a being greater than which none other can be imagined. Do you agree with that definition of God? Like we can imagine something greater than unicorns. So that's where that's where the
And that would break down because of.
that's the soft atheist objection to it. So you agree with that definition, right? Okay, well, if you agree with that definition, then here's the thing. If you imagine God existing, or if you imagine God who is all powerful, can do anything that he wants to. He's strong, he's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, all of these things. You can imagine that kind of a God, and he doesn't exist. Then you can imagine a God who's greater than he. A God who is all of that and does exist. So therefore, if God is the being greater than which none other can be imagined, then God by definition has to exist. That's his argument. I'm not saying I like it, but that's his argument. It's what's that?
In order to be the greatest, he has to exist.
Yes, because in the premise that is sort of smuggled in there is to exist in reality is greater than to exist in one's imagination
Or not exist
Yeah.
at all.
or in thought. Yes.
But he is not human and he is spirit.
Well, God is spirit for sure.
Right. But it's light, it's pure divine light. It is like nothing.
So when we say God is light, that we understand that is a metaphor.
And it
You know,
speaks.
well, God does speak. Yes, he does.
Yes.
Well, clearly he does because he has spoken, and the word is a record of what he has revealed to us. It is what he has revealed to us. So in many cases, directly speaking to the prophet and to the like Moses and things like that. Yeah, go ahead. Or were you going to say something?
Well, I'm just gonna comment on that. Doesn't really logically follow.
Or were you talking about the ontological argument?
Right, partly because you're going to have different people that are going to have a different understanding of what ultimate actually
Yeah, you're
counts for. And so in your mind, what is ultimate is XYZ, mine is ABC. So which one of those beings exists?
Yeah, but see,
Wait, tell me
that's
if
where
it's important.
we have to define our terms, right? I would say that it's problematic just simply because it's an a priori argument. And a priori arguments work like this. They're definitional. By definition, an a priori argument is definitional. Did you all get that?
Alright,
Okay, so here's what I mean. Let me give you an example. A triangle is a shape with three sides, right? That's what a triangle is by definition. Is that true? Is a triangle a three-sided object or three-sided shape?
That's what we did talk.
Okay,
that's
so
the definition, yeah.
so we have the definition. Similarly, with the ontological argument, we start with the definition of God. Fair enough?
Okay.
The problem is when we start with the definition of a triangle, we have the definition. We even have the concept in our head. We can think about what it means. Do triangles actually exist in the real world?
Yes.
Two-dimensional.
You can't get that from the definition. You have to go see.
Is that kinda like trying to draw the perfect circle?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, you cannot get that from the definition. There's nothing, the definition is there, it's rock solid, it's pristine,
Sure.
but just because you can get a definition of something doesn't mean that that thing exists in the world around us. Do hobbits exist?
Or you could use a unicorn example.
Or
You
unicorns?
can define something.
You can- Just because you can define something doesn't mean it actually exists. Yeah,
I believe they do, because where did they come from if they don't come into the mind of man, to put on on.
you believe what exists?
On the hobbits.
Yeah.
What about unicorns?
And unicorns.
Well,
yes.
unicorns do exist.
They're in the Bible, right?
That's right.
No, they're not
No,
actually.
they're not?
Yes.
But you mentioned unicorn. Have you ever heard of a narwhal?
There is.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
an animal, a mammal
That is,
with,
yeah.
with one horn, right?
Right.
That's a unicorn. So,
But the word
That's- you're right.
mysticism is in the Bible, and
Yeah.
that is mysticism. That is beyond the physical thinking.
well, supernatural, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have, so there, obviously, and we have accounts of this in scripture, that people have mystical experiences with God, what we would say mystical. You know, John says in Revelation, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Paul talks about, I knew a man who was caught up to the third heaven, and all this sort of thing.
Yes, and there are
So-
different
so, yeah,
areas.
We see that. Well, yeah, of course. The Bible talks about 3 different places called heaven. So we see all that sort of thing. But yeah. Anyway, where were we? We got kind of far afield there. That was because it was Ansel. It was those darn scholastics. See what kind of
the Lord of the Rings would get in here somewhere.
the Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
I have never seen.
I think my youngest daughter's a hobbit. She's born on September 22nd. She hasn't grown like an inch in 3 years. So I don't know.
I was the same way.
The
though.
cake.
I didn't get tall.
Yeah, the cake. She had the ring, the one cake to rule them all. Yeah, September 22nd is Hobbit. It is Bilbo and Frodo's birthday in the books. That's her birthday. So.
Oh, that's her
She's
birthday?
born on Hobbit Day.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So, I'm convinced she's a Baggins. Anyway,
Is your last name back?
no, it's not. Anyway, so I might have Baggins blood in me somewhere. Who knows? I'm kind of tall for a Hobbit, though.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Peter Abelard. Oh, this guy, humbling. He is brilliant philosopher, scholastic theologian. Has a lot of really significant moral failings. Very
I
humbling.
know, I have a little bit above my plate.
Peter Lombard produces probably what is the standard text with which the people educated in the classical sense or in the medieval sense would be educated with. Thomas Aquinas produces the Summa Theologica. The Summa Theologica is a work and it's unfinished. He never finished it. This is fascinating. He's in the process of writing this book and it's huge. It's a magnum opus. And he's in the process of writing this book and he has a kind of mental breakdown. And he comes out of this mental breakdown or this experience that he has. Some people will describe it as a mental breakdown. Some would describe it as an ecstatic experience. And he comes around and he says, everything that I have written is ashes. That's his claim. And then he just doesn't write on it. He doesn't finish it. But the Summa Theologica is picked up by the Roman Catholic Church as even what is used today as a systematic theology for the Roman Catholic Church. What's that? So anyway, that is Thomas Aquinas. Interesting guy. We'll get to him. Whew, he's got some stuff. We even have now a resurgence of Protestants.
I have his picture pulled up,
Yeah,
Aquinas.
yeah. There's a resurgence of Protestants who are delving into Aquinas philosophy and theology. Natural theologians. They call themselves Thomas from his name. Thomas is such an important figure in the Roman Catholic since he's one of 3 doctors of the church. One of 3, all throughout history. That's the magnitude with which they view Thomas Aquinas.
Because of his work on the Eucharist, mostly, well, not mostly, but
Yeah.
that's a significant part.
Yeah, he actually comes up with the philosophical underpinning for transubstantiation.
Had that conversation a few times.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, lots of times. And then we have Duns Scotus. Brilliant guy. He's more of a Platonist, I believe. And Duns Scotus is where we get the term dunce from. Just so you know, that's where we get the term dunce from. Because people begin to start falling out of love with the scholastics by Duns Scotus, and they think that they're just a bunch of ivory tower intellectuals who are just yammering on about nothing. And so they begin to call people dunces, who they think are stupid because they think that the scholastics are stupid. In fact, Duns Scotus is he's a brilliant guy, brilliant philosophy. We'll touch on that a little bit as we get there too. And then we get William of Ockham. I'm not a fan. Occam is most well known for the Occam's razor. Have you ever heard of that? Anybody ever heard of Occam's razor? Occam's razor is a principle of philosophy that says that if you've got 2 competing theories, usually the one that is simplest is the best one. So basically, it's called the razor because you are shaving off explanatory principles and trying to go with the simplest explanation. It's also known as the principle of parsimony. But that whole principle you need to take with a grain of salt, because if you have on the one hand Newtonian physics, which is very simple, straightforward, but it doesn't actually explain all the phenomena. On the other hand, you have relativistic physics or quantum physics, very much more intricate, multiplying explanatory principles. But you know what it does? It makes sense of the data. So you have 2 competing theories, one that's simple, that doesn't make sense of the data, one that is more complex, but it does make sense of the data. Occam's razor should have no part in shaving off those explanatory principles. That's my beef with Occam. Now I think Occam would actually agree, but modern implementers of the razor, which usually form the ranks of the New Atheist movement, which is almost defunct now, thank goodness. They like to talk about Occam's razor a lot. For example, they'll say, well, if I can explain everything by just talking about matter, time, space, and energy, why do I need spirit, soul, and mind? Why do I need to talk about that? I'm like, okay, well, then explain freedom. Explain the freedom of will. The ability to choose. Otherwise, we're all just determined, biochemically determined. Now, I'm enough of a Reformed philosopher, theologian to understand the bondage of the will, but our will can be free, so that we can be free to obey God. Anyway, so but William of Ockham, that's one of the ones that we'll talk about. Then we get to the late Middle Ages. Yeah, we don't have a lot to talk about, at least right now in this era. But there are some huge events that happen here. Late Middle Ages, we see John Wycliffe, morning star of the Reformation. John Wycliffe, he kind of founds a group that is named by their adversaries the Lollards. after him because it's sort of a play on an onomatopoeia because they're just going la 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 la. Because evidently John Wycliffe and his followers like to talk a lot. And when they talk, they like to talk about the Bible. John Wycliffe begins to really rediscover or really reaffirm in his own life and in practice the principle of sola scriptura. Now, he doesn't call it that. Later reformers and those, talking about the Reformation, we'll talk about sola scriptura, meaning the scripture alone is our authority. But Wycliffe starts getting back to this principle of sola scriptura, and as he does, he begins to notice that there are a lot of things in the Bible that don't sit well with Roman Catholic doctrine. Imagine that. And he and his followers begin to call him out, and they are denounced as heretics. So that is John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe's work makes it over to Bohemia. I got lost something. We'll get to Bohemia in a minute. Sorry, I thought I had it in different order. Then we have the Papal Schism. This is the Avignon Papacy. What this means is we have a pope, a French pope in Avignon, France, and we have an Italian pope in Rome. And they're arguing about who the real pope is. So yeah, that's kind of my response to. So that's the Papal Schism.
And they tried to appoint a third pope to settle it, and then nobody gives up the office, and they have to.
Yep. So this is also a great thing to bring up too.
It is.
Because they were elected. This is your church, not mine. So if the Pope is infallible, then the papacy itself has been excommunicated. So, all right.
Details.
Yeah, I know. Then we have the fall of Constantinople. This is impossible to overstate the importance of this event in the history of Christendom. Because what happens at the fall of Constantinople is that the scholars, remember Constantinople, this is the capital of the Eastern Church. What do they speak there?
Greek.
Yeah, what was the New Testament written in?
Greek.
Yeah, what did Plato, Aristotle write in?
Russian.
No.
Greek.
They were Greek. All of the classics are in Greek. What was the Septuagint written in?
Greek.
The old version of Old Testament that the apostles themselves quote the most in Jesus. It's written in Greek. So all of this Greek stuff, the scholars see that the Turks are coming, the Muslims are coming for us. But I'm a little soft-handed scholar, I have that milquetoast handshake because I'm too busy turning papers and not actually working. I know so many of those guys. I have my nice little dishpan hands. I don't want to fight anybody. I'm out of here. And they leave. They leave Constantinople and they take all of their manuscripts with them. They take all of this Greek stuff with them. Where do you think they end up at? Well, no. They go the other way. Rome. They end up in Rome. And when they end up in Rome, all of a sudden, all of these Latin-speaking Western theologians start reading some of this Greek stuff. And they begin to realize, wait a minute, this Greek version of the Old Testament, this Greek New Testament, they're way different than my Latin stuff. And that sparks the Protestant Reformation. It also sparks the Renaissance. So you have the Renaissance and the Reformation happening directly because you have this massive migration of people from the Eastern Church moving west. There's a founding of a group. It's different than what it's known as today, but there's a founding of a group that is known as the Humanists. And it's not like the Humanists like you think of them now. These guys, their calling card, their motto was ad fontes, which is Latin for back to the sources. And so they're like pushing Jerome. Jerome is out the door. You get a Catholic guy named Erasmus who starts putting together a Greek New Testament. And then Erasmus's Greek New Testament becomes a critical text that Martin Luther gets a hold of, and he starts translating it into German. And now all the German people can read the Bible for themselves, and they're beginning to notice some things that are different from what the Catholic Church has been saying. Oh, and then a guy by the name of William Tyndale gets a hold of it and starts translating it into English. And the English people begin to realize, wait a minute, this is different than what we've been saying. And then a guy by the name of Johannes Gutenberg, a little bit before all of this, creates a thing called the printing press.
Most important invention of the second millennium.
And it totally revolutionizes distribution of knowledge. So, so between the fall of Constantinople, the invention of the printing press, the humanist drive to translate the word of God into the language of the people, that sets the stage for the Protestant Reformation.
Perfect storm.
Yeah, and God is the author of history, and it gets a paragraph in modern revisionist history.
But it really is irksome.
It's like, you guys don't even understand. This is a history of Western civilization. And you have cut civilization out of it. Anyway, but that begins with the fall of Constantinople.
What was the time between that and Martin Luther's?
Martin Luther's 1517. So he's less than 100 years later.
Less than 100
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah, So we have the Hussites of Bohemia, which takes place in the 15th century. This is all in the same general time frame. You have the Hussites, and one of my favorite, John Ziska, who is an undefeated general. Now that's something you can put on a resume. And he only had one eye, so that's pretty impressive. But yeah, we'll read more about him. I like that.
His eye got
Do what?
His eye got defeated.
Well, yeah, I don't remember how it happened. It was probably in a battle somewhere. Who knows? He's got one of those cool scars, right, that goes right through his eye, like you see. He's got a good story to go along with it, I'm sure. So, but the Hussites, because by this time John Huss is dead, he's been burned at the stake, and but that movement started in Bohemia. So it goes from Wycliffe to Huss to then Ziska. Who starts that revolution in Bohemia. So that happens then. And then, is that it? Is that my last one? I think it is. Well, that's the last thing that we'll be looking at here. But then we go right into the Protestant Reformation. So, we see Bohemia fighting, and that goes into the Protestant Reformation. That begins on October 31st, 1517. Yes.
Reformation Month.
What's that?
Reformation Month.
Yes,
Here and there.
indeed. Yes, indeed. So anyway, that's the overview, and we've gotten kind of into some tangents, but we will revisit those various events in more depth as we go along. But that's the timeline that we're looking at for the remainder of our time together here, and you'll get a lot more also reading through here as well. So let me encourage you to go either purchase the book and read it, or purchase the audiobook and listen to it. If you've got a Kindle, you can do that right now. But yeah. Anybody have any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Did you say John Wycliffe did the English translation, the first English translation?
I think he did an English translation, yes, but it's not one that is based on like the current, like the King James is going to be based on Geneva Bible, which is going to be on William Tyndale's translation.
Oh, William Tyndale.
Tyndale is going to form his is going to be more or less the basis that gives like it's sort of the fountainhead that gives way to the rest of these English translations.
What was he not part of that that movement that caused
Oh yeah.
the Reformation?
Yeah, no, Wycliffe, he's called the Morning Star of the Reformation precisely because of that.
Wycliffe or Tyndale?
Wycliffe is before Tyndale. And Wycliffe, he does start writing and things like that. But he's also very much opposed at this time. No, and Tyndale is as well. I mean, they're hunting him down as well. But by the time Tyndale gets done, then you've got the English Reformation soon after him start getting under sway. The English Reformation is Henry VIII, and of course he's doing it for his own personal benefit. But he has people behind him who are actually more theologically minded. So those guys are actually the ones driving it, and they're coming up with all the various justifications for his Reformation. That's an interesting story. It belongs to next year, but Henry VIII, right?
Right, and he wanted a son.
Yeah. So he wanted a son. So Henry VIII was not supposed to ever be king. His brother was king, but his brother died. Well, he, as a young man, takes his brother's wife as his own queen. She is a princess from Spain, and so he takes her for a queen. But then when he finds out time's going by and he's not having a son, he's got a daughter, right? Mary is her name, but he doesn't have a son. Time goes on, and he's like, I need a son. I need an heir for the throne. Otherwise, the Spanish guy's going to eat my lunch, and so he decides I need to divorce my wife, and so he goes to his own theologians who they want to break with Rome because they see the Reformation happening on mainland Europe, right? And they're of that same opinion. So he comes, he says, guys, how can I justify? And then they say, well, go ask the Pope for an annulment of the marriage. Well, he's not going to give him an annulment because if the Pope Leo X at the time, if he gives Henry VIII an annulment, then that means that the King of Spain is going to be hot on his heels, and the King of Spain has an armada, right? So he's not one to be trifled with. So Leo's a smart politician. He says, no, you can't have an annulment. Well, Henry's like, wait a minute, I'm the king, you're not. So Henry's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kick all you Catholics out of my country, and I'm going to seize all your land, and I'm going to create the Church of England, and I'm going to be the Pope or the head of the Church of England, right? So he does that, kicks all the Catholics out. He establishes the Church of England, and he marries Anne Boleyn, has Elizabeth, and was it Edmund or Edward? Edward. Okay, Edmund, Edward. I don't know. He has Edward. Edward's kind of a little weakling king.
His mother was Jane Seymour, wasn't
Oh, I
he? Okay, go ahead.
have no idea. But he ascends to the throne, but then dies pretty quickly.
Yes.
And then Elizabeth I reigns, and she doesn't care one way or the other, Protestant Catholic, except that, well, actually Mary comes in after Edward. But that's a hiccup in history, but it's a good one though. Because what happens is Mary, like after Edward dies, Mary comes in and she kicks all the Protestants out. They all go to Switzerland, which is where John Calvin has been ministering. They become Puritans. And Mary eventually, after Bloody Mary gets done with her reign, she's done. Elizabeth moves in. Elizabeth, in order to justify her reign, she has to be a legitimate child, right? Well, the only way she's a legitimate child is if she goes and says that the Church of England is legitimate, because it was the Church of England that sanctified her father's marriage to her mother. So she goes and she becomes just purely, utilitarian grounds, becomes Protestant, and the Church of England has been in force ever since. So yeah, it's all political machinations.
What about John Knox though during the time of the
Oh, John Knox, my dude. He is my guy.
Presbyterian Covenanters?
Yes, that's a different.
That's the next one. That's session.
Yes.
So were the same scholars that were working on the King James translation, when did they start? Did they start early on under,
No, as far as I know, and I'd have to look that up for sure, but as far as I know, that James was the one who just basically, so James was raised a Presbyterian. He was raised essentially. Now, he was raised a Protestant, rather, along Presbyterian lines. Now, I say Presbyterian because it actually was Puritanism back then, but he was raised according to that. But so they thought, hey, we've got a Puritan king. We're going to get a Puritan kingship. He was diabolical. he hated the Puritans, and I think if he would have been okay going back to Rome, because they would let him do most of what he wanted. But he was not a good king. But he did say, look, he did, what do you call it? He paid for and commissioned the creation of the King James Bible. Funny story though is when the separatists came over here, the Pilgrims, they didn't bring King James Bibles with them because they hated that translation. They brought the Geneva Bible and they brought a printing press too. But they, I don't think that ever made it. But they were on the what do you call that? Where they list all the things, the manifest, the ship manifest. That was on there. But yeah, it was. I don't think they ever got it working. But yeah, they brought the Geneva Bible over because they couldn't stand the King's version, which is so funny nowadays. Like everybody who thinks that's the original one. Like the actual Christians back then hated it. So just so you know, I got nothing against the King James Bible. I think it's fairly solid. I think it's harder to read, and not because of the words are different, but because the grammar is different. It's formed differently in Middle English than it is in modern English. So, but you know, and I think it also has a weaker text basis. But you know, don't let Grandpa Doug or Uncle Doug hear me say that. So,
are there churches that use the Geneva Bible now?
I don't know. I don't think
Because the
like
King James
I'm
is so
sure
popular.
I'm sure there probably are somewhere, but I don't know. Yeah, but you know the King James that they use now is not actually the original King James.
Right, it's newer.
Yeah, it's like 150 years newer. So
Yeah.
1789.
yeah, something like that.
1760.
Something like that. Yes, I'm sorry.
The Mennonites or maybe the Quakers still use the Geneva Bible.
Really? That's
Oh,
cool.
yeah, I think they do.
That's cool. I mean, I've read parts of it. I compare it every once in a while.
What's the original Reformation Study Bible?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm not opposed. It's good. You know,
I have one.
do you really? That's cool. I think they're great. My versions of them that I have are all electronic, but yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't have an actual physical copy. It's a shame. All right. Well, any other questions or comments? We can just kind of hang out and talk for a while. Good. Well, this is where we're going. This is just like the roadmap. Okay. This is the introduction to the syllabus.
Got
You
two
will.
people watching live as well.
Oh, awesome. Very good. Well, hoping that yeah, it'll be profitable. And I know that I always find studying history profitable because it links us with our heritage, you know, links us with our forebears. And it shows me, you know, God was merciful in their time and still worked through them. God will be merciful to me and work through me. You know what I mean? So that is encouraging. All right. It also shows that it's been 2,000 years, guys. We're not going anywhere. That's right. We're staying here. We are going to not only occupy, we're going to rule. That's just all there is to it. I've read the end of the book. I know what's coming.
Yes.
All right, let's pray, and we'll be dismissed. And welcome you to hang out, talk, or whatever you do. Our Father in heaven,